Hey y'all, it's me again. I'm going to continue reading from my book, The Secret Lives of the First Ladies. Here we go. Sleeping Beauty. Nellie Taft advised her husband on all manner of things, playing an integral role in his success, or for that matter, failure as a public figure. But of all the services she provided for the advancement of William Taft's career, few were as important as her efforts to keep him awake. Whether because of his enormous girth or because he seemed like to doze, Will was constantly falling asleep. At meetings, funerals, public receptions, you name it. It may sound trivial, but this was no small feat on the part of Nellie. Consider what she was up against. One night in the Philippines, Taft actually slept like a baby through the entire destructive duration of a Pacific typhoon. Oh, perfect. Perfect is gonna be. Okay. Shotgun on March 4th, 1909, outgoing President Theodore Roosevelt made an announcement. He is breaking tradition, deciding not to write back to the White House with a successor, Taft, in the inaugural parade. True to form, Nellie Taft's mind was immediately one step ahead of everyone else's. The breach of protocol offered her a window, and she jumped right through it. No First Lady had ever ridden in the procession with her newly inaugurated husband, but that didn't stop Nellie. Indeed, it's thriller. Of course there was objections, she wrote in her memoir, but I had my way. Driving ambition. Upon becoming First Lady, one of Nellie's chief concerns was presidential transportation. Carriages simply would not do any longer. She petitioned Congress for an automobile appropriation, and their less than generous response led her to make a groundbreaking decision. Nellie approached the Pierce Aero Company with a request to give the administration a discount on their costs. A request they gave in with the proviso that they be allowed to advertise the fact that they were the official automobile of the White House. No First Lady before Nellie would have dared go there, but Mrs. Taft wanted those beautiful rights. She gave him, affording Pierce Aero the right to ensnare by the copy that advertised the executive connection. Where's the beef? The First Lady's stroke in 1909 posed a thorny problem for the Taft administration. How was such a public woman's sudden confidence to be dealt with? The president had no intention of disclosing the truth to the public, both for the sake of his marriage privacy and the sake of the American people who might have been alarmed by such a development. The solution was terribly imperfect at best, but largely effective. Taft and his staff told the curious that Nellie was exhausted by all her efforts and was taking time to recuperate. But as the months dragged on, Nellie's situation became harder and harder to conceal, and her stroke became an open secret. Nevertheless, it remained a source of embarrassment both to her and her husband. It took steps, many of which were a bit absurd, to remove her from the mainstream. Nothing illustrates this more clearly than the fact that during much of recovery, Nellie, who insisted on overseeing White House dinner parties herself, whatever organization, took her meals near the mansion's pantry. There, behind a secret, she ate her dinner while listening to the conversation beyond, conveniently hidden from the other diners to ease their digestion. Executive branches. Nellie Taft's most enduring legacy was also her most beautiful. As First Lady, Nellie was determined to remake Washington's Potomac Park. Cherry trees whose splendid blossoms had so dazzled her in Asia were brought from all over the capital, whereas to the city for planting. They weren't enough, however, until an old acquaintance decided to help out. Yukio Ozaki, mayor of Tokyo, got word of Mrs. Taft's landscaping operation and offered some assistance in honor of the visit the Tafts had made to Japan during their travels. He arranged for a shipment of cherry samplings to be sent, nearly all of which died. Undeterred, he got another batch of new. They fared much better, as everyone who visits Washington today can see for themselves. Holy hell, so those are the same trees that came during the Taft administration? Damn. Those are some strong-ass trees. Chapter 23. Ellen Axon Wilson. May 15th, 1860 through August 6th, 1914. Married June 24th, 1885. Presidential husband, Woodrow Wilson. Children, Margaret Woodrow, Jesse Woodrow, and Eleanor Randolph. First Lady, 1913 and 1914. Astrological sign, Taurus. Religion, Presbyterian. Soundbite. 3 daughters take more time than 3 canvases on their struggle to balance art with motherhood. When newly elected President Woodrow Wilson gave his inaugural speech in 1913, there was one woman in the audience who wasn't satisfied with her seat. Shortly after Wilson began, she got up and stood right before the podium. Until hearing every word, she was his wife, Ellen Wilson, and she had already heard every word several times. Woodrow had practiced the speech on her, but seeing him give it as chief executive was an opportunity she wasn't going to miss. And to everybody who saw her there beaming up at him, one thing was overwhelmingly clear. She loved the guy deeply. Ellen first met Woodrow Wilson up in Georgia, the oldest of 4 children born to Margaret Jane Hoyt Axon and the sparks began to fly. By then, Ellen had become a stunning, utterly brilliant young woman with a love of literature, foreign languages, and art. An accomplished intellectual with a fiercely independent streak. Woodrow, a lawyer and fellow Southerner who come to hear Ellen's father preach, was smitten by her immediately. The feeling soon became mutual and they were engaged 5 months later. Wilson put forth no small fee in getting Ellen to accept his proposal for her. Sorry for pausing it. The dogs were acting up like as if somebody had come home. I didn't know if it was my boyfriend's sibling or my boyfriend himself. Okay, let's continue. But there were greater challenges as well. The Reverend Axon had become terribly sick, and Ellen felt duty-bound to look after him until his death in May of 1884. Then, with the money she inherited, Ellen decided to make a dream come true. She took off to New York City to study art and give flight to her bohemian urges. She painted, taught, mixed with the creative crowd, and began to develop real commercial talent as an artist. They were the last months of her life in which she lived completely for herself. As profound as Ellen's love was for art, she developed another love. One that would shape the remainder of her life. Woodrow Wilson has thrilled to his fiance's experience in New York and continued his studies as a graduate student at Johns Hopkins. After they married in the summer of 1885, it was off to Bryn where Woodrow had been offered a teaching position. While there, they set about creating the pattern that would continue in their relationship for years. Mrs. Wilson put her enormous intellectual faculties at the service of her professor husband, poring over texts on everything from German to political philosophy, turning herself into a kind of full-time teacher for Woodrow. She began to raise their daughters with the help of a nurse and continued to devote time to beloved painting. But it was as a scholarly counterpart to her husband that Ellen truly excelled. Together they made a brilliant match. With his wife's support, Woodrow went on to secure another posting at Wesleyan College in Connecticut and then in 1890 at Princeton. For many years, Ellen Axon Wilson slept with a revolver under her pillow. I did not know that. Creepy, but comforting, I guess. New Jersey was the beginning of big things for the Wilson family. Her husband's exploding schedule of teaching and writing began to take its toll on his nerves. Ellen made things easier on him by becoming a model homemaker. She took care of their daughters, continued to offer her intellectual services to Woodrow, and entertained in a home that had a revolving door for friends and family. They seemed no end to Ellen Wilson's list of talents and interests. She even found time to act upon her progressive politics by volunteering for a women's employment agency. Things got more hectic for her when Woodrow became president of Princeton in 1902, forcing her into the limelight as never before, and forcing her to keep an ever watchful eye on her husband's erratic health. Wilson had a bad habit of working too hard. In the summer of 1910, after years of being a devoted scholar and academician, he decided to get into a line of work that wasn't nearly as strenuous: politics. He won the race that year for governor of New Jersey and found himself given a chance to act upon all of his book learning rather than just passing on to the next generation. Allen's profound influence on his ideas and lifestyle continued. In fact, she instigated the meeting that would change her husband's career forever. In 1911, Ellen arranged a dinner engagement with William Jennings Bryan, a prominent Democrat who was keeping an eye on Wilson's impressive legislative programs in the Garden State. He and Wilson got along famously, developing a relationship that would give Woodrow the Democratic nomination for president in 1912. Wilson's frail constitution remained an issue, however, and Ellen couldn't help wondering if her husband was up to the job. But other instincts won out. He was the smartest man in the country, and as far as she was concerned, and who was she to stand in the way of greatness? Besides, she adored him, and he wanted to be president. When Wilson won the election, Ellen resolved to do her part to preserve his stamina and sanity. In addition to lending her considerable mind to the creation of his speeches and agenda, she made sure he got enough rest and relaxation. Two words that often seemed absent from her husband's otherwise expansive vocabulary. She also entertained a great deal with the eager help of her three daughters, earning a reputation as an elegant hostess, but it was in her efforts on behalf of the downtrodden that Ellen truly shone. In addition to bettering the lot of female employees of the government and getting involved with the fight against child labor, Mrs. Wilson became the first lady to tour the slums of Washington. Appalled by what she saw there, Ellen played a leading role in drafting the Alley Dwelling Bill, which sought to better the conditions of model houses in which so many of the capital's black citizens suffered. It was soon dubbed Mrs. Wilson's Bill. The year 1913 came getting busy. After spending some happy months at an artist colony in New Hampshire, Ellen arranged for the White House wedding of daughter Jessie in November, and then exercised her artistic muscles by planning an overhaul of the Madison's garden. It was a lot to handle for a woman who continued to keep an eye on her overworked husband. In fact, Ellen had been paying so much attention to Woodrow's well-being that she overlooked her own, and naturally, following March of 1914, put an end to that. Upon examining her injury and performing minor surgery, the doctors found more than they bargained for, namely tuberculosis of the kidneys and Bright's disease. Ellen lived long enough to see two final important tasks through. Her daughter Eleanor was married in May, an event too dear to the First Lady's heart not to plan despite her plummeting health. But Ellen also urged the President to get Congress to pass the housing bill that had been named for her. They did it just in time for her to learn of it. A fitting send-off for such an extraordinary public-minded woman. Please rate, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification and subscribe, because I need at least 300 subscribers on YouTube and like 1,000 followers on TikTok. So if we could get that, please do. And please like and subscribe and whatnot on YouTube. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And please ring that bell notification so that you can know when I upload next. And please pay for something on eBay and or Mercari, okay? And once we get to 300 subscribers, I might do something special for you guys. Yeah, I'm gonna do something special for you guys once I get to 300 subscribers. Okay? Bye!